I'm Izzy at Minerva. Today we are continuing our pattern drafting series and we're going to look at how to create a simple V-neck jersey stretch top. As you can see in the image next to me here, this is what we're aiming for. It's a very simple top to draft, but it's a really nice alternative to having just a standard sort of circular crew neck top, a round neck top. So it's a lovely detail to look at together. As you can see in the image next to me here, we're also going to do some little puff sleeves as well. That's a really nice little detail that we can add into our sleeve block once we've made the adaptations to the front. As you follow along today, you are going to need your standard pattern drafting tools, and they are listed right here for you to see. Obviously on there, you need your jersey block to be able to follow along today. So if you've not done that, have a look on a previous video that we filmed all about how to measure your body and create this block. The one that you're going to see on the screen above is my body block. It's going to look different to yours. That's totally fine. The principles of what we're doing today can be applied to your own bespoke block. In today's video, I am wearing our Minerva exclusive viscose chalot, which is a really lovely drapey fabric, and this is our Minerva exclusive Rose Relations pattern. It's one that I really love, and I was playing about with tucks on the top, at the front, and also on the sleeve with this one. It was just a little pattern drafting experiment and it's really fun. It worked out okay, so here we go. Nice little square neckline and off we go. If you'd like to recreate something similar, do take a look back on our pattern drafting series all about pattern drafting for woven fabrics with no stretch. There's loads of videos there for you to follow along too. But let's crack on with creating our gorgeous little top now. On the screen in front of you, we've got our front jersey block and our back jersey block. The only difference between the two is simply that the back neckline is higher, and for the front I've just cut away the back neckline, so it just makes it a bit more obvious for me when I'm drafting. To start off with, I'm going to raise my hemline of both my front and my back by 8 centimetres. This is just because I think it's going to sit nicely at 8 centimetres. If you wanted a cropped look, you could raise it to around the waist or a little bit higher, but for me I'm just going to do it this sort of length. Okay, the fundamental thing we want to decide is the shape of this V. Now, I am not going to draw a straight line V. I don't think that's very elegant. And also, let's not forget that our bodies are slightly curved, aren't they? We're not straight, we're not made of straight lines. So I am going to add just a slight curve to the neckline, but it's still going to come into a nice point at the bottom. I'm going to mark a point that is 7 centimetres away from the top of the arm side there. And I've done that on the front. I'm also, just while I remember, I'm going to do that on the back as well. So basically what I'm doing is just sending my neckline out a little bit further. Okay, I'm then just going to mark a point that is along the centre front line, and it is 2 centimetres below the arm side line. And then I'm just going to find a nice soft curve between those 2 points. Now, it is a curve, and that's nice, but it's looking very much like a V, isn't it? So you can cut out your front neckline now, and then we'll move on to the back neckline to create the shape that we want there too. So on our back here, we know that the shoulder width needs to only be that wide. So you basically just need to kind of gently draw in a new back of neck curve line. Okay, great. Let's measure the length now using a tape measure of your neckline here. And do the same for the back. Okay, add the neckline lengths together and then times that by 0.85. Now you could multiply this by 0.9 or 0.8. We're going to go for a happy halfway house of 0.85. I seem to remember that worked really well for this one that we've got going on there. The reason why we do this is so that it can just sort of shrink it in and hold it in place so it's not flapping around. Okay, so draw a rectangle that is the length that you need. For me it's 31.7, and also then make it 4 centimetres deep. Lovely. Now it can be quite difficult to line up the neckband with the front and back neck, so it's quite helpful to put a little notch where the shoulder line is. So on our neckband, our centre back is going to be on the fold and the centre front is going to be sort of crossed over here at the front down here. So what we need to do is, in order to annotate where our shoulder is to measure the length of the back neck, so for me 11.8, times that by 0.85, And whatever distance you get there, I want you to mark it offset from the centre back. So for me, it's about 10 centimetres, and that then becomes our shoulder notch. That's going to be really helpful when we're stretching that neckband around. Okay, we're going to move on to our sleeve now as the final piece that we need to do to create this little top. Now we could obviously just draft and leave our sleeve block as it is, but I would like to do something a little bit more creative. So I'm just going to mark a point. What I want to do is create a nice like short sleeved version. So I'm just going to mark a line that is 7 centimetres below the arm side line. And then I'm just going to trim that off completely. Working on my short sleeve top, I'm just going to draw a little line that is 3 centimetres above my arm side line. Now, if you've not got your little notches on, like I do not for this particular block, for where your sleeves match in with your front and back block, just make a note of the distance that is. For me, it's 6 centimetres, and then just mark that offset from the underarm seam on the front 6 centimetres and the back 6 centimetres. For you, it'll probably be something different, but all we're telling ourselves as we do the block is that's the point that we're not gathering anything in. Next, measure the top of the curve of the sleeve head. I've got 14.5. Tap that into your calculator and then divide that by 2.5. Okay, whatever distance you've got at that point, mark that along the curve from here. So working from there, mine is 5.8, so I've got one there and another one, 5.8 here. Draw a line from those points down to the fold line of the sleeve. And then quite simply, we're just going to cut along these lines. Okay, so now what we effectively want to do is to add volume to the top of the sleeve head here. So we're literally just going to sort of push these up and recreate a shape that is giving more volume in. So we want to be creating volume in here between all of these. We want the center line of this one here to still line up with the center front of the sleeve like that. And really, it really is just about where you want it to be, what kind of aesthetic you want. But what you're trying to do is get a bit of an even distribution around here. And once you feel like you've got a nice little curve here and you've added in that extra, then just sketch in the rest of your curve for your sleeve head and cut it out. Great, wonderful. So we've done all the adaptations we need to our block to create this beautiful little V-neck jersey top. So let's go grab tracing paper and create our pattern pieces. I'm going to add a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance to all of my seams. If you would prefer just to add 5mm seam allowance because you prefer just to overlock your jersey straight off, then that's absolutely fine, and you do that at this stage too. Okay, let's start off with our neckband here and add our seam allowances. And all we're going to say for this pattern piece is we're going to place it on the fold as we already annotated. We've added our seam allowance around the other 3 sides. Grain line is just going to follow the line of the centre back and also centre front on this particular example, and we're just going to cut 1 on the fold. And for our back pattern piece, we have just added seam allowance around the outside here, but cutting this one on the fold. And the other thing I've added is definitely the notch there to tie in with the shoulder notch at this point here on the neckline. So we're just going to cut 1 of those, and grain line follows the centre back. Okay, and then for the front pattern piece, we are placing the centre front on the fold, adding a hem and a seam allowance all the way around the perimeter of the rest of the pattern piece, adding our little notch here. Now, I probably should have noted that we need to add a double notch on the back just for consistency, so that we've got that on the back. The thing is, this pattern piece is just going to be reflected over, so we're probably only going to put 1 notch here anyway, but it's just good practice to put a double on the back and a single on the front. So yeah, so that's all it is for that one. What I might do, because we've got 2 kind of separate pieces, I might just add a little notch where the waistline is for both of them, just so I can easily mark those up, although they should lay flat on top of each other beautifully. Okay, and then we've got the sleeve pattern piece. We're going to place it on the fold. It's just a mirrored version of a sleeve, really nice and simple. And we're going to cut 2 on the grain line like this. I've added a hem and a seam allowance. Brilliant, so now we've created all of our pattern pieces. Let's go and cut them out of some gorgeous fabric. To start off with, we are going to sew the front to the back along the side seam. So with right sides together, put the front over the back and just line up and pin the side seams, and then sew using whatever seam allowance you've drafted your pattern with. So whether that's 1.5 centimeters like me, or whether you've done a slightly different one at 5 or 6 mil, so you can just overlock it straight away. Sew your seam using a stretch stitch. Now that could be a lightning bolt stitch or a zigzag stitch, or you could be using thread that is elasticated like the Gutermann Mariflex thread. So using your preferred method, just sew those seams. Once you sew the side seams, we can then move on and pin and sew the shoulder seams together. And then once you've pinned and sewn the shoulder seams and the side seams, you can just finish those seams in your preferred method. And by finish, I mean overlock them, or just leave them as they are if you'd prefer, because jersey doesn't really need a finishing stitch necessarily. It's just a nice aesthetic and can strengthen the seam if you do overlock the edges. What you can do though is you can just press those seams open if you've not got access to an overlocker, or you can zigzag stitch at the end of them together too. So you've got a few nice little options of things you can do and how you can finish those seams. This is your project, so you choose how you would prefer to do that. We've got 2 sleeve pattern pieces and they're both mirrored, they're both exactly the same. The first thing that I would like to do is just to put them right sides together and just pin and sew these little underarm seams down here. Lovely, just like that. Okay, what we're going to do now is, remember between that notch and the top, we extended the sleeve head so we can gather it in now. So we're going to run a line of gathering stitches all the way around from notch to notch. I'm going to do 2 lines, and they are going to be 5 mil from the raw edge and then 10 mil from the raw edge. And I'm going to reinforce the stitch at the beginning and then just leave a loose line of thread at the end so that I can then pull on those ends to create the gathers and to bring the sleeve head to the right size to fit the arm side. Okay, so we've gathered those 2 sleeve heads. You can see 2 little lines of stitches, and then we've got the ends of the thread at one side only, and the other side is reinforced. I'm going to put my sleeve into my top now, and I want to line up the seam of the sleeve with the side seam of the top. So just pin that in place with right sides together, and that's going to act as your little reference to make sure you've got the sleeve in correctly. And then I'm just going to line up the notches next. Okay, so we can see that's now going to sit into the sleeve really nicely. We just need to continue pinning the rest of the sleeve head into the arm side. So in order to do that, I'm actually just going to turn the top inside out. It just makes it a bit easier. So right sides are together, the sleeve's on the inside, and what I'm just going to do is gather the stitches until the circumference of the sleeve head is the same as the arm side. Okay, and once you feel like you've gathered the sleeve enough, what you then need to do is decide where you want to focus the gathers on. So you could evenly distribute them around the whole thing if you want to, and that's why I've sort of said do it from notch to notch. Or you could just gather them in a little puff at the top up here, which is I think what I'm going to do for this particular one. So I'm just going to gather them so that they're sort of equidistant on either side of the shoulder seam up at the top. What you could do is, retrospectively of course, you could grab your tape measure and just say I want the gathers to be 4 centimeters to either side of the top of the shoulder seam, and a little notch in at that point, and then just distribute your gathers between the 2 notches on either side at the top. It's quite nice to do it like this because then you can turn it out to the right side and just see aesthetically, like, what does it look like? Are you happy with the gathers and the distribution, or, you know, do you want to shift it and change it? And obviously this is such a massive design, you know, process, isn't it? It's nice to have a bit of flexibility. Okay, so we've sewn both of our sleeves in and gathered according to the amount that you want to. The penultimate thing to do before we hem is now to do our neckline. So let's take a look at that pattern piece. So we have one pattern piece, which is this one. It's being cut on the fold, and the first thing we're going to do is just fold it lengthways and just press it in place. Okay, so our folded edge is up at the top, up here, and we're just going to lift the ends and wrap them over, imagining that this was basically, you know, our neckband. You can see how that's sort of sitting now, can't you? We're just going to pin that in place. Okay, next we're going to do a line of basting stitches at 1 centimetre seam allowance. And the reason why we're going to do it like this is just to hold all 4 pieces of that V together in a nice neat shape. Just like that. Next, take your top and do the same process with this V shape here. And we're going to run a line of basting stitches, just starting around here, about 1 inch above the base of the V. And the basting stitch is going to be 1 centimetre away from the raw edge. We're going to go down one side, pivot at the bottom of the V, and then come back up again. Okay, what we're going to do next is we're just going to snip into the bottom of that V, but don't go past your stitch line. Oh, this is looking cute, isn't it? I love it. Okay, so what we want to do now is to attach this collar to the top here. So right sides are together. Obviously there's no real right side or wrong side of this particular thing. So grab a pin and just pop it right in the middle and the base of the V that you've basted there. And then pop that pin right at the bottom of the stitch line, on the basting stitch line of the top. So we're just going to pop that pin in and just leave it in place at that point. So what we can do now is kind of like rotate this around with the idea that stays in place. Easier said than done. So just pop that all the way through. Then I'm just going to rotate the neckband around so that at this point it lines up beautifully. And it should be, you should be pinning it directly through the 1 centimetre seam allowance on both sides. Now we've still got the V, the base of the V, like sort of marked in there. So then I'm just going to keep that pin, make sure that's still right in the bottom of the t-shirt, and just rotate the neckband around to then pin the other side in place. Brilliant. What we want to do now that we've done all that hard work is we actually just want to sew it in place, but we want to flip it over to the other side so that we've got the wrong side facing out as we sew it. Now, the reason why we want to do it like this is because we just want to make sure that we're not getting any puckers on the actual t-shirt, the body of the t-shirt. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is just sew over my line of basting stitches, but just like 1 or 2 mil further away from the raw edge. I'm literally just going to sew that point in place with a standard straight stitch. Okay, so just flip that out, check you're happy with it, and if you're not, you can just go back and refine it and neaten it up just a little bit more. Okay, so now what we've got is the rest of our kind of neckband is loose, but we have sewn in that beautiful V, so we've done the hard work. What we need to do now is just continue to pin with right sides together the rest of the neckband. Now we do have this helpful little notch here, which lines up with the shoulder seam, so I'm going to pin that next. Great, and then just continue pinning the rest of the neckline so that you've got a nice even distribution of the neckband around the neckline. Wonderful. Once you pin that in place, let's sew it using our standard seam allowance, being very careful about what we do down at the bottom, down at the V, just making sure that we catch that and sew that really nicely. Lovely. Okay, so I've sewn that in place and I've also just overlocked it as well. I'm going to press it so that it sits nice and flat. And then next we're going to do our hems. So in order to do our hem, I allowed a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. So all I'm going to do is just overlock and finish the raw edge, and then I'm just going to turn it under 1.5 centimetres and stitch in place. I would still recommend using a stretch stitch for your hemline, so either a zigzag stitch or a lightning bolt stitch, or if you have got twin needles, you can also finish it beautifully with twin needles with a nice double line of stitches. So it's completely up to you how you'd like to finish your garment. So here we have our lovely V-neck top. It looks absolutely gorgeous. I'm really happy with that. You could make that out of so many different types of fabric and it would just look gorgeous. So to have your own bespoke pattern that really fits you so gorgeously is worth the time and effort. So thank you for joining me today. I've been Izzy at Minerva. It's been great fun to talk you through how to create this little top. Hope you've really enjoyed that. Please do leave your comments below. We always love to hear from our maker community here at Minerva, and do subscribe to our YouTube channel where there is loads of amazing content all about sewing. So thanks for listening and thanks for joining me today. I'll see you next time.